Welcome to Real Talk, the show where we look at issues facing our youth today. My name is Ome Kongo and I'm your host, and today we're talking about the issue of employment, career services. What are our young people doing to take themselves to the next level, prepare themselves for the professional world, whether after they get out of college, while they're still in high school, even at the middle school level. Everyone should always be thinking about resumes, community service, internships, but many of our young people don't take the time to dissect this today. So with us today, we have a very special guest who has spent over 25 years in the nonprofit sector working with organizations that enhance the lives of young people, not only here in Montgomery County, but across the nation. She's the author of the book, Put Your Shoes On, a step-by-step guide for youth looking for employment. And she also happens to be my sister. So we'll welcome our special guest today, Miss Muadi Dibinga. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you wrote this book. It's entitled Put Your Shoes On. Many people probably wouldn't think of it as a career services book, but this is a book that has been approved for as a resource for Montgomery County school students. But why the title, Put Your Shoes On?
That's a very good question. I wrote Put Your Shoes On in response to some of the challenges that I felt that young people were facing on a day-to-day basis trying to go out and look for work. When I was younger, our mother really instilled in us this idea about a work ethic and what it means to present yourself outside. So things like coming to work on time, being dressed appropriately, engaging, presenting yourself in a professional way, those are things that were sort of beat into our head. And so, not literally, of course, but you know, she was really, both of our parents were really deliberate and intentional in their efforts to make sure that when we went out into the workforce that we were prepared. I began working with young people when I was 13 myself at a youth program, and from that time forward, over the last, since then, that's been about maybe 20, 30 years, I've been amazed by the lack of preparedness among some young people when they come in for interview. I have interviewed young people who've come in with their pagers going off. I have interviewed young people with their flip-flops on, where parents or their friends have knocked on the door while we were engaged in conversation and say, is he ready to go? And so the idea for Put Your Shoes On was a long time coming. I had always wanted to do something to address that. The title itself came to me when I was working at the Bar Association in New York about maybe 10 years ago. I worked in the New York Bar Association, and it's one of the oldest and most prestigious bar associations in the country. And I was coming to work one day in this really great building. It's in Midtown. It was very heavily populated. You'd have lawyers and judges and politicians just coming in and out throughout the day. So for a young person to get an internship opportunity at the Bar Association was a big deal. It was a really coveted opinion. So one day I'm coming into work, and it was a late morning for me. I was walking in around 10 o'clock, and I was walking through the halls. It was a very busy day, a lot of classes going on, and I was on my way to my office. And in order to get to my office, I had a corner office. You had to walk down a long hallway and turn this corner. I get up to the second level. I'm headed towards my office, and I see a young girl filing. And I was really excited. It was a young African-American girl, which was a real novelty in that time at the Bar Association. So I started feeling really prideful. And, from the neck up, she looked like, she was on point and stunning. So as I got to her, and I looked at her, and I was about to, congratulate her, for some reason, I don't know what it was, my eyes just happened to look down, and she was standing there barefoot. She was standing in the middle of the Bar Association of New York City.
Not a bar, but the bar.
But the bar.
The bar.
The
Okay.
big bar. Barefoot and filing. And, I had to catch myself because I try to show some compassion when I'm dealing with young people. But I had to grab my pearls. And I looked at her and I tapped her on her shoulder. I said, "Sweetheart, you are not at the beach. Put your shoes on." And, she was sort of taken off guard. She was a little bit embarrassed, and she put her shoes on right away. And I felt myself getting a little annoyed. I'm like, how are you in here without your shoes? But I let it go. The next day, I saw her, and she looked like new money. Hair was done. Outfit was, on point. Shoes were on. And she looked at me. We smiled. And from that point forward, we had a really nice rapport. But if we go back to the original day, what annoyance I felt for her in that moment was transferred to all the adults that I passed on my way to my office after having seen her. Because as people were saying, "Oh, good morning, Muadi," I kept thinking, you saw that girl standing out there barefoot, you said nothing. You saw that girl standing out there barefoot. No one took the time to stop and pull this young woman to the side and say, there's a way to present yourself. you're doing yourself a disservice. So that's where the title came from, and that was the real impetus for me to really sit down and put these thoughts to word, and to put these thoughts to paper rather, and make it available to other young people.
So there's 2 points that we need to look at here. One is the issue of adult expectations of young people, and then of course we'll get to the issue of young people and what they need to be doing as relates to get to a job. But you made that interesting point as relates to the expectations of our young people. That's the issue that we see not only in the employment sector but also in our schools. What do you feel is going on nowadays? Because even when you talked about being younger, it wasn't just our parents that had high expectations of us, but other people in the community. And it seems that has disappeared. Is that part of your motivation in doing the work that you do and reaching out to the young people?
Oh, absolutely. You know, our mother used to say when I was younger that young people come into this world with a level of genius. And that when you're a child, when you're young, you're as close to your genius as you're ever going to be. And that once the world starts to get a hold of you and you start to get older, we dumb you down, right, as you get older. Meaning that children come into this world with ultimate unlimited potential, a fearlessness, an excitement about life, a curiosity. And we don't feed that. And we have low expectations for them. You know, I went into schools, when I first introduced the school, I brought it into a Montgomery school, and I'm not going to name the school, but I had 2 separate experiences where an adult who had brought me in to talk to her young people said to me, and I'm quoting almost verbatim, don't worry about it too much. Most of these kids aren't going to amount to much anyway, so don't feel like you have to give your best. And then I had another teacher who gave me what I call the warning label. This child is going to be disrespectful. This child is not going to listen to you. This child is going to act like she has an attitude, but you know there are a couple of good ones in there, so you know work with what you have. And you know I was dumbfounded because I've never, in the years that I've been working with young people, and like I said, I started when I was 13. Never had that experience, and I've worked for where we grew up. We grew up in a very challenging neighborhood. I've worked with detention diversion programs. I've worked with at-risk youth. We'll talk about that term at another time. And I've never had an experience with a young person not responding to me. And what struck me in those 2 situations was the fact that we have adults, not everyone, right? I'm not going to use this big broad strokes and say that these generalizations that nobody cares about our young people, because we know that's not the case. But there are a small group perhaps, of people, adults, who have low expectations or no expectations for their young people. And they go into the classrooms, they go into these community service places with that low expectation and that kind of consciousness, which does not challenge our young people to come up higher. So if you don't set a bar, if you don't set a standard, if you don't lay out an expectation that I know that you can do better, what incentive do they have to really come up higher? You know, one more story, we have a brother who's a teacher in the public schools in Boston. And he has his young people reading Shakespeare. Our brother will walk into a classroom, knowing that the children, he just assumes they're going to give their best. And he communicates that to them, and he gets results. There are other teachers, there are other educators who are doing that, getting the results, but we need more of them.
Absolutely. No, those are great points. And to that end, what do you feel our educational system needs to do, especially right here in Montgomery County, to change that culture of low expectations? Because it's not only going to manifest itself in the classroom, but as we start talking about the job experience, it's going to transfer itself as relates to getting recommendations and other types of just letting kids know about a job. They won't even do it if they don't feel like a child is ready. How can teachers, educators start to change that mentality?
I think that the teachers and educators can change that mentality by looking at their own consciousness. Right? In this world, we have to be aware of a few things. There are things that we can influence. There are things that we can control, and there are things that we can change. We can't change necessarily what's happening in the homes of the young people. When they come to the school, you get what you get. But we can influence how they move in our classroom by first checking ourselves. We have to come in with a high standard, not just for our young people, but for ourselves. We have to model for them that behavior that we want to see outside of the classroom, which means we've got to come to class dressed, prepared, speaking to our young people and engaging with them from a level of respect. Every young person may not necessarily respond in a way that we want to, but at least we have to set a tone that allows them to see, I see you, I see the genius in you, and I have the expectation that that's going to come to pass. The challenge is that a lot of the people who are teaching are broken themselves. right? They may be working in schools where they're not appreciated, where they're not respected. They themselves may be coming from home environments where the pressures of raising a family, particularly in this economy, they're allowing what's happening outside of the classroom to filter into their classroom by way of their teaching, by way of their body language. So if the schools, if the community organizations are going to change and create spaces where young people can really transform, we have to take care of our teachers. We have to take care of our educators. We have to make sure that they're being provided with the resources, the skills, the training, the support to make sure that they not only have the professional proficiency, but that they also have the spiritual and the mental and the physical capacity to do the work. And that's not happening, I don't think, at least to the extent that it could be. So that's one big, huge step I think that needs to happen.
Okay, no, absolutely. So great points on that. So the book itself, as I was looking through it, what I appreciated about it is it's not just you have to have desire, you have to have passion. That's really important. I mean, you mentioned those things, but the book is it's a manual of what young people need to do. What could somebody who's working in career services right now, who works with young people, or a young person who wants to get the book themselves, what would they find when they open this book that could help them?
First of all, they will find real, pertinent, contemporary issues that young people are facing when they are in the workforce. We speak about the dress code. It's not enough to say get a suit. Some of the young people that I've worked with, that you've worked with, they don't have money to get a suit. They may not necessarily be able to fit that physical image. So first of all, it's about looking at the resources that you have in your closet, at your church or house of worship, or your friends or your family, and galvanizing your personal resources and galvanizing your network to help support your desire to get a job. There are three things that we talk about. Number one is get your head right. And in the book, it talks about the fact that sometimes when we want to do better, we have groups of friends and people in our network who are not necessarily supportive of those goals. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that if you want to get a job, you must attach yourself to like-minded people. So if you have friends, I refer to them as knuckleheads in the book. I have to keep it real. We're on Real Talk, right?
That's right.
So in the book, I refer to them as knuckleheads. If you have someone who you call your friend who does not support your desire to go out and become gainfully employed, kick them to the curb. If you have someone who you call your friend who does not support your desire to come up higher in your life, kick them to the curb. So that's what I talk about, get your head right. Mm-hmm. When I say get your head right, it also means have realistic expectations of what will work for you. We're in the day and age of, videos where we're watching Pimp My Ride and Pimp My Crib, and, we want this 15 minutes of fame, and everybody's waiting for these $1 million to come their way. And so we sometimes glamorize what our first job is really going to look like. Mm-hmm. First job I had, I made $6.25 per hour before taxes, right? So I went in there with the real expectation of what was my earning power. Mm-hmm. So it talks about what's really happening out there. We'll talk about get your game right. The next part is get your gear right. We talk about what is an appropriate apparel to wear. We talk about this issue we have with pants not coming up to our waist. We talk about dressing like you're going to work and not to the club. Mm-hmm. Things that you don't necessarily, you think they're common sense, but common sense isn't as common as we think it is. Mm-hmm. We talk about what it means to go into a store, for example, and know that you might encounter the person who's doing the hiring at that door, so you must be dressed correct. What does it mean to have a resume? What does it mean to have a cover letter? So you'll find the basic information that you might find in sort of a generalist book, but I really speak to some of the challenges, some of the issues that I see young people bringing to the table. Mm-hmm. That third part of that is to really get your game right. So we talked about getting our head right, get your gear right, game right. You have to have a plan. What's your strategy? Where are you going to look for work? What hours can you work? Can you work full-time? Can you work part-time? Can you work in the neighborhood? Do you have enough money to get on the bus and go travel out to these different places? What's your school schedule? How much money do you really need to earn? Some of the young people today are contributing to the household, right? So they're not just buying CDs. Do people buy CDs or they just download music now? Okay, well, you know what I'm saying.
Well, no, absolutely. And I want to get more to some of the sections in the book, some of the actual chapters, once we take this quick break, because there are some really great gems in the book that I want people not to miss. So we're going to get to a little bit to that when we get back from this break. We'll be right back with Real Talk with our special guest, Miss Muadi Dibinga. Welcome back to Real Talk, the show where we look at issues facing our youth. And we've been talking about youth employment issues with our guest author here, Ms. Muadi. And during the break, I had to go out and run and just grab a copy of the book. And again, it's called Put Your Shoes On, and everybody needs to understand the beauty of what's in here, because you break this down to such a basic level. I'm looking at one of the pages, the section where you're talking about resume writing. Mm-hmm. You even tell people how to fill out an envelope, something that was basic when we were teenagers. It was obvious. But is it in this day and age that our kids don't have these basic skills as it relates to writing a resume, filling out an envelope?
Last year, I had to sit down with a college freshman and show her, because she asked me how to address an envelope. Freshman in a very, very good college. Okay. Graduated from a not so shabby high school. Mm-hmm. Did not know where the return address part went on the envelope or to whom it is addressed. So I had to sit down with her. So when you ask me, is
she know how to find a post office?
Well, listen, after a while, you have to let people do stuff on their own. So it's like, you get on the website and find the nearest post office. But, I was dumbfounded. So think about it. This is somebody who was able to get into and attend a college. Is a sophomore now, to my understanding. So someone who was already on the career track to go to school and get into graduate from high school and go to college, does not know how to address an envelope. What does that say? What are the chances that a young person who does not have that access, what are the chances that they'd be able to do that? So absolutely, yes, this information is basic. We also talk about this whole information age and Facebook and MySpace and the dangers of putting pictures up there or having compromising material on there. The young people are shocked when I show them information that supports that people have been fired. People have not been hired because of things that they have found about potential candidates online. Then the first thing you say, well, isn't that illegal? You don't have money to hire an attorney to sue, right? So whether it's legal or not, understand that it is. That's the reality. And once you put something up, you can delete, you can erase, you can change, you can break that computer. It's in cyberspace for life.
Yes.
And so that you must be very conscious. People are Googling, but I do it. Because you want to understand, people can present themselves to one way to you, but if you're going to be a job where you're working with young people or you're interfacing with the public and you have pictures that show that you do not have good judgment, or maybe you have a job and you're posting negative comments, right, about your boss or your customers, it happens every day. And so, no, people are not getting this information. I have young people that don't know that having an email that says inappropriate words in your email address is not the way to go if you're trying to find a job. We talk about that. Your voicemail. If I'm calling you in response to an advertisement and you've called me and you say that you want an interview and I call you back, I don't want to hear the latest song or the top 40 or the hip hop track. I don't have that kind of time. What I will do is hang up and go to the next person. So we talk about what it means to have professional. We call them your toolkit. Right? What's in your toolkit? A professional email address. Yahoo is free. There's no reason for you not to have a professional email address. Your phone, your voicemail, your recording. Also, some young people have talked about the fact that they may live in a household where they don't always get their phone messages or they have some challenges keeping the phone on. We come from a background where we understand what it's, you and I, to struggle financially. So we talk about get a prepaid phone.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That you can just pay a certain amount of money so that somebody can call you back. Because if I call you back for a job and I get that tone that says the phone is disconnected, I'm going to the next person. We talk about typographical and grammatical errors in your materials. Listen, when people put out an advertisement, you tend to get 100, 150 applications per job. And in this day and age, jobs that used to be the private domain of young people, fast food restaurants, clothing stores, that type of thing, now you're competing with older Americans, older generation people who have been either phased out of their jobs, laid off, or now have to bring a third income into their home. Right. So you must be on point. So having names on your resume that are other than the name that's on your birth certificate is also not a good idea. So for example, if your middle name or your nickname is Pookie, I don't want to see Pookie on your resume, your cover letter, or any other documentation related to this job. We talk about getting references. They're going to want to talk to somebody that knows you, that you've worked with that can vouch for you. And usually when I work with young people, they're like, well, I don't know anybody. Hopefully you have a good relationship with at least one teacher in your school. Maybe there's somebody at the corner store, a proprietor of a business in your neighborhood, in your area. You have to think about these things in advance. So when it's time for you to go and fill out all those applications, you have all the information. Do you have your working papers? Are you of age to work? Do you know the minimum age? So those are the kinds of pieces of information that are critical, that are not being shared widely enough so that they're accessible to all young people that are looking for work.
And see, that's what I like when you're talking about, because it's one thing to talk about what the teachers need to do, what the educators need to do, but you have a great focus in here and in your comments right now on what the young people need to do themselves. So many we live this excuse mentality. Everybody's feels like they're entitled. Gimme, 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 or I didn't know. What is it that a young person needs to do to develop the responsibility to realize that it's all on me? I can't have any excuses.
You got to get your hustle on. Period, bottom line. There is nobody living on earth right now that should or will have you at the top of their agenda. The only person that's going to have you consistently thinking about you 24/7 is you. Now, when you're young, 4, 5, 6, your parents, we hope, or your guardians or your grandparents take care of you. But once you become of age where you're in school, you're the one who's primarily responsible for your own well-being. You're the gatekeeper, right? You're the treasure chest holder. You hold your dreams. It must be your responsibility, because at the end of the day, you are the only person that you can count on consistently to be there and have your vision on point. People can help you, but nobody can kick you down the road of transformation. People can guide you, but no one's going to come and wake up, it's time to go to work, put you on the bus, make your lunch. That has to come from you. So when people say things to me like, oh, well, they didn't call me back. Did you call them? I put in 5 applications, and you put in 6 applications. I don't have shoes. You had shoes to get to school, didn't you? The excuses, I say the blame game is lame. If you really want something, it's your responsibility to go out there and make it happen. And it can be done. It happens every day. Nobody who has achieved any level of success is more special, more important, more gifted than the next person, right? When we go down this road of growth, right, there's a guy, Michael Beckwith, who I like a lot.